"Thompson, what's that thing supposed to be?" The gruff voice of Petty Officer Martinez echoed across the armory as he stared at the unusual rifle being assembled with surgical precision. The weapon looked nothing like the standard issue Barrett M82 or the familiar CheyTac M200 that dominated the sniper platforms at Naval Special Warfare Group 2. Instead, what emerged from the custom case was sleek, compact, and deceptively simple. "Looks like something you'd buy at a toy store," another voice chimed in, followed by a chorus of chuckles from the assembled SEAL trainees. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Sarah Thompson didn't lift her eyes from her work. Her fingers moved with mechanical efficiency, each component clicking into place with the confidence of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times before. The rifle that took shape bore no resemblance to conventional sniper systems. Where others relied on bulk and raw power, her weapon embodied precision engineering and advanced ballistics theory that most of the men surrounding her had never encountered. The morning mist hung heavy over the Coronado training facilities as Sarah Thompson stepped off the transport vehicle that had brought her from the administrative offices in San Diego. Her personnel file, thin and deliberately vague, had preceded her arrival by exactly 72 hours. The document listed her as a technical consultant with a specialized weapons assessment designation, language bureaucratic enough to satisfy the administrative requirements, while revealing absolutely nothing about her true purpose or background. At 26 years old, Sarah cut an unremarkable figure among the towering frames and imposing presence of the SEAL candidates who populated the base. Standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, with auburn hair pulled back in a regulation, ponytail and eyes the color of storm clouds, she possessed the kind of appearance that allowed her to blend seamlessly into any crowd. This anonymity had served her well throughout her career, though the men now watching her unload her equipment had no idea just how valuable that particular skill had proven to be over the years. The base itself buzzed with the controlled chaos, typical of advanced military training. SEAL team candidates moved between obstacle courses and classroom instruction, their conversations punctuated by the distant crack of rifle fire from the marksmanship ranges. The air carried the familiar scent of gun oil, salt spray from the nearby Pacific, and the subtle metallic tang that seemed to permeate all military installations. For Sarah, these sensory markers felt like coming home, though she kept that familiarity carefully hidden behind a mask of professional detachment. Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a 20-year veteran whose scarred hands and weathered face spoke of countless deployments in hostile territories, had been assigned to orient the new arrival. His initial briefing had been succinct and tinged with obvious skepticism. Technical consultants, in his experience, were typically academic types who understood weapons theory but had never faced the brutal realities of combat application. The fact that this particular consultant was a woman only added to his reservations, though military protocol prevented him from expressing those concerns directly. "Your quarters are in Building C," Rodriguez explained as they walked past a group of trainees practicing close quarters combat techniques. "Separate from the candidates, per your classification. Meals are served in the main facility, but you're not required to maintain the same schedule as active personnel." His tone suggested that he viewed her presence as an inconvenience at best, a distraction from the serious business of preparing warriors for combat at worst. Sarah nodded politely, her attention already shifting to the various training activities she observed around the base. Her trained eye automatically cataloged defensive positions, sight lines, and potential complications that might affect long-range engagement scenarios. The habit was so deeply ingrained that she performed these assessments unconsciously, same way other people might notice architectural details or landscaping choices. The weapons storage facility where she would be conducting her assessments occupied a reinforced concrete structure near the center of the base. Inside, rows of carefully maintained firearms represented the pinnacle of military small arms development. Barrett rifles capable of disabling vehicles at extreme range shared space with precision instruments designed for surgical elimination of high-value targets. The collection represented millions of dollars in advanced weaponry, each piece maintained to exacting standards by armory personnel who took genuine pride in their work. What drew immediate attention, however, was not the impressive array of conventional weapons, but rather the modest case that Sarah had brought with her. Unlike the bulky transportation containers that housed the military sniper systems, her case appeared almost delicate. Constructed from aerospace-grade aluminum with custom foam inserts, it measured barely 3 feet in length and weighed less than most service rifles when fully loaded. The first group of SEAL candidates to encounter Sarah's equipment responded with predictable skepticism. These were men who had been trained to respect firepower, to understand that in combat situations, bigger often meant better. The idea that effective long-range precision could be achieved with something that looked like it belonged in a sporting goods store rather than a military armory challenged their fundamental assumptions about combat effectiveness. "Ma'am, with all due respect," said Petty Officer First Class Williams, a massive Texan whose previous career as a ranch hand had given him extensive experience with conventional hunting rifles. "That thing looks like it couldn't drop a deer at 200 yards, let alone engage targets at the distances we're training for." His comment drew knowing nods from several other candidates, men who had spent months learning to handle weapon systems that weighed upwards of 30 pounds and fired cartridges capable of penetrating armored vehicles. Sarah's response was characteristically understated. Rather than engaging in technical explanations or defending her equipment choice, she simply continued her methodical preparation routine. Each component of her weapon system received careful inspection before assembly. The barrel, constructed from a proprietary steel alloy that most military contractors had never heard of, gleamed with the subtle patterns that indicated hand lapping to tolerances measured in fractions of thousandths of an inch. The action, machined from a single block of aircraft-grade aluminum, operated with the smooth precision of a Swiss timepiece. What the observing SEAL candidates couldn't appreciate was the revolutionary engineering that had gone into creating this deceptively simple weapon. Traditional sniper rifles achieved accuracy through brute force, using massive cartridges and heavy barrels to overcome the variables that affected projectile flight. Sarah's rifle represented a completely different philosophy, one that used advanced materials science and computer-aided design to achieve superior performance through elegance rather than raw power. The optical system mounted on her rifle raised even more eyebrows among the observing personnel. Instead of the massive scopes favored by military snipers, with their multiple adjustment turrets and complex reticle systems, Sarah's optic appeared almost minimalist. The housing, constructed from carbon fiber composite, weighed less than most iron sights. The glass, however, represented the cutting edge of optical technology, with exotic lens coatings that gathered light more efficiently than anything currently in military service. Master Chief Petty Officer Harrison, the senior enlisted advisor responsible for sniper training at the facility, had observed the equipment setup with growing concern. His 25 years of military service had taught him to be suspicious of anything that deviated significantly from proven methodologies. In his experience, unconventional approaches to combat problems usually resulted from inexperience rather than innovation. The fact that this particular innovation was being demonstrated by someone with no apparent military background only heightened his skepticism. "Thompson," Harrison's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I understand you're here to conduct some kind of assessment, but I need to make something clear. These candidates are training for real-world combat scenarios. They don't have time to waste on experimental equipment that might work under laboratory conditions, but fail when lives are on the line. The implicit challenge in his statement was clear to everyone present. Sarah, however, seemed completely unfazed by the confrontation. Her response when it came was delivered in the same calm professional tone she had maintained since her arrival. "Master Chief, I appreciate your concerns about combat effectiveness. Would you be willing to allow a practical demonstration under controlled conditions?" The request caught Harrison off guard. Technical consultants, in his experience, preferred to work with data and theoretical models rather than expose their ideas to the harsh judgment of live-fire testing. The fact that this woman was volunteering to subject her unconventional approach to immediate scrutiny suggested either supreme confidence or dangerous naivety. Given her apparent youth and civilian status, he strongly suspected the latter. "What kind of demonstration did you have in mind?" Harrison's question carried an undertone of challenge, as if he was daring her to propose something that would expose the limitations of her approach. Sarah's answer was delivered with the same matter-of-fact tone she had used throughout the conversation. "Standard qualification course, any distance you consider appropriate for your training objectives. Same conditions your candidates face." During assessment, the proposal sent a ripple of anticipation through the assembled SEAL trainees. Military culture thrived on competition and demonstration of skill under pressure. The idea of watching a civilian consultant attempt to match the performance standards expected of elite military personnel promised entertainment at minimum, and potentially valuable insight into the effectiveness of unconventional approaches to familiar problems. Harrison found himself in an interesting position. Military protocol generally discouraged allowing unqualified personnel to participate in training exercises, particularly those involving live ammunition and high-stress conditions. However, the woman's apparent confidence in the educational value of demonstrating the superiority of conventional methods made the proposition appealing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. If her unconventional equipment failed under realistic conditions, it would serve as a valuable lesson for his trainees about the importance of relying on proven methodologies. Very well. Harrison's decision was made with the certainty of someone who had never seen his fundamental assumptions challenged. "We'll schedule a demonstration for tomorrow morning. Standard long-range qualification protocol. Targets at 800, 1200, and 1600 meters. Weather conditions and time constraints identical to candidate assessment. Parameters." The news of the upcoming demonstration spread through the base with the speed that characterized all military gossip. By evening, the story had evolved through multiple retellings into something approaching legend. The civilian consultant with the toy rifle was going to attempt the same. Qualification standards that eliminated roughly 60% of SEAL candidates during their first attempt. The general consensus among base personnel was that they were about to witness either an embarrassing failure or an educational demonstration of why military equipment standards existed in the first place. Sarah spent the evening hours in careful preparation, though her routine bore little resemblance to the intensive training regimens followed by military snipers preparing for qualification attempts. Instead of range sessions and equipment checks, she spent her time in quiet meditation, mental rehearsal techniques that had been developed far from military training facilities, but had proven their effectiveness in situations where failure carried consequences far more severe than administrative embarrassment. Her weapon cleaning ritual was performed with the same methodical precision she had displayed during initial assembly. Each component received individual attention, not because the equipment required maintenance after minimal handling, but because the routine provided psychological preparation for the challenges ahead. The familiar weight of the rifle components, the subtle resistance of properly lubricated mechanisms, the satisfying click of precise tolerances coming together. All served to center her mind and prepare her body for the physical demands of precision. Shooting. The meteorological conditions for the following morning promised to present significant challenges for any marksmanship demonstration. Weather reports indicated variable winds, with gusts potentially reaching 15 to 20 miles per hour across the shooting complex. Temperature variations between the air near the ground and higher altitudes would create thermal layers that could deflect projectiles unpredictably. Humidity levels were expected to fluctuate throughout the morning, adding another variable to the complex calculations required for extreme long-range accuracy. For conventional military snipers, such conditions represented the kind of environmental challenges that separated truly elite marksmen from merely competent shooters. The massive cartridges fired by standard military rifles possessed enough energy to punch through moderate wind resistance, but even they could be deflected significantly by the kind of conditions forecast for the demonstration. Most experienced military marksmen would have requested postponement of any formal assessment under such circumstances, recognizing that environmental factors beyond their control could compromise even perfect shooting technique. Sarah's approach to the challenging forecast was characteristically unconventional. Rather than expressing concern about the adverse conditions, she seemed almost pleased by the complexity they would add to the demonstration. Her evening preparation included detailed study of local topographical maps, analysis of historical weather patterns for the area, and construction of detailed wind charts based on the terrain features surrounding the shooting complex. The night before the demonstration, as base personnel settled into their quarters with expectations of witnessing an educational failure, Sarah sat quietly in her assigned room, running through mental rehearsals of the following day's challenges. Her visualization exercises were not the standard military training techniques taught to snipers, but rather a more sophisticated form of mental preparation that integrated psychological conditioning with physical muscle memory development. In her mind, she fired each shot dozens of times, accounting for every variable that could affect projectile flight. Wind speed and direction at multiple altitudes, temperature variations along the bullet's flight path, the subtle differences in air density that would occur as morning progressed into afternoon, even the minor gravitational anomalies caused by local geological features. Each factor was calculated, integrated into a comprehensive ballistic solution, and rehearsed until the physical movements required for compensation became automatic responses rather than conscious decisions. The weapon that would carry her through the following day's demonstration lay partially disassembled on the small desk in her quarters, each component arranged with the precision of a surgical instrument layout. To any observer, the equipment would have appeared unremarkable, perhaps even crude compared to the sophisticated military hardware housed in the base armory. The reality, however, was that every element of her rifle system represented years of development work by some of the most advanced materials, scientists and ballistics engineers in the world. The projectiles she would fire during the demonstration bore no resemblance to conventional military ammunition. Where standard sniper cartridges relied on mass and velocity to overcome atmospheric resistance, her rounds achieved superior performance through advanced aerodynamics and exotic materials that most military contractors had never encountered. The bullets themselves were works of art, machined to tolerances that exceeded the specifications for precision aircraft components, their surfaces polished to mirror finishes that eliminated microscopic imperfections capable of affecting flight. Characteristics. As base personnel settled into sleep with expectations of witnessing an interesting failure, Sarah completed her final preparations with the calm confidence of someone who had never missed when lives depended on precision. The demonstration that awaited her represented not just a test of equipment or technique, but a carefully calculated revelation of capabilities that had been developed far from military training facilities and tested under conditions where second chances did not exist. The morning would bring challenges that would test not only her marksmanship skills, but also her ability to maintain anonymity while demonstrating abilities that might raise uncomfortable questions about her background and experience. For now, however, she allowed herself a few hours of rest, secure in the knowledge that the following day would unfold exactly as she had planned, regardless of what the observers expected to witness. Dawn broke over the Coronado training complex with the pale gray light that preceded sunrise along the California coast. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly westward, its surface rippled by the same wind patterns that would challenge any precision shooting attempt within the next few hours. Base personnel began their morning routines with the efficiency born of military discipline, but today carried an undercurrent of anticipation that was palpable in every conversation and casual glance toward the shooting complex. Sarah Thompson had been awake since 0400 hours, not from anxiety or restlessness, but because her internal clock had been calibrated by years of operations that demanded peak performance during the early morning hours when atmospheric conditions provided optimal stability for extreme long-range engagements. Her preparation ritual began with precise physical conditioning exercises designed not for general fitness, but specifically to enhance the fine motor control and respiratory discipline required for precision marksmanship under stress. The physiological demands of accurate shooting at extreme distances went far beyond what most people understood. Heart rate, respiratory patterns, muscle tension, even the subtle tremors caused by caffeine consumption could affect bullet placement at ranges where success was measured in fractions of inches rather than feet. Sarah's morning routine addressed each of these variables systematically, preparing her body to function as a stable platform for her weapon system, regardless of external stressors. Her breathing exercises followed patterns developed not in military training facilities, but in disciplines far older and more refined than modern warfare. Deep, controlled inhalation followed by precisely timed breath retention, allowing her cardiovascular system to achieve the steady rhythm that would support sustained accuracy under pressure. Her pulse, monitored throughout the routine, maintained the controlled cadence that indicated optimal preparation for the demands ahead. The weapon system that would carry her through the demonstration received its final preparation with the methodical attention to detail that characterized everything about Sarah's approach to precision shooting. Each component was inspected not just for mechanical soundness, but for the subtle signs of stress or wear that could affect performance in ways too small to detect through casual examination, but significant enough to influence bullet placement at extreme range. The barrel, still the most critical component of any precision rifle, despite advances in other areas of weapons technology, had been manufactured using techniques that pushed the boundaries of current metallurgical science, rather than the conventional button rifling or cut rifling used by military contractors. Sarah's barrel had been created through a proprietary process that achieved bore dimensions accurate to within 50 millionths of an inch. The rifling pattern itself represented years of computational fluid dynamics analysis, optimized not just for bullet stabilization, but for minimizing the microscopic gas turbulence that could affect projectile flight characteristics. Master Chief Harrison arrived at the shooting complex 30 minutes before the scheduled demonstration, his presence indicating the seriousness with which he regarded the morning's events. Despite his skepticism about the unconventional equipment and the civilian consultant who had brought it, his professional instincts recognized that this demonstration could provide valuable training opportunities for his SEAL candidates regardless of its outcome. Harrison's experience with training elite marksmen had taught him that confidence and competence were not always correlated in obvious ways. Some of his most successful students had appeared nervous and uncertain during their initial assessments, while others who projected supreme confidence had failed spectacularly when faced with the unforgiving realities of precision shooting under pressure. Something about Sarah Thompson's demeanor, however, suggested a third category entirely, one that he had encountered only rarely in his decades of military service. The SEAL candidates began arriving at the complex in small groups, their conversations focused on speculation about the upcoming demonstration. Military culture encouraged friendly competition and the kind of professional rivalry that pushed individuals to exceed their previous performance standards. The prospect of watching a civilian attempt to match military qualification standards provided entertainment value, but also represented an opportunity to learn from either success or failure. Petty Officer Martinez, whose initial comments about Sarah's equipment had established the tone for much of the base's skepticism, arrived with a group of fellow candidates who had already begun placing informal wagers on the outcome of the demonstration. The betting odds heavily favored spectacular failure, with most personnel expecting the civilian consultant to struggle with even the basic mechanics of military qualification protocols, let alone the precision required to meet established standards. The shooting complex itself represented state-of-the-art facilities for long-range marksmanship training. Multiple firing positions provided different angles and elevations for engaging targets at distances, ranging from standard infantry ranges out to the extreme long-range scenarios that special operations personnel might encounter in the field. Electronic target systems provided instant feedback on bullet placement, while environmental monitoring equipment tracked wind patterns, temperature variations, and atmospheric pressure changes that could affect projectile flight. The targets selected for Sarah's demonstration were positioned at the standard qualification distances that all SEAL snipers were required to master. 800 meters represented the minimum engagement range for most military sniping scenarios, a distance where environmental factors began to significantly affect bullet trajectory, but where competent marksmen could still achieve consistent accuracy with proper training and equipment. 1,200 meters pushed into the realm where only truly skilled shooters could maintain precision, and 1,600 meters represented the outer limits of what most military personnel considered practical engagement range. Weather conditions for the morning had developed exactly as forecast, with variable winds creating the kind of challenging environment that separated competent marksmen from true masters of the discipline. Sustained winds of 10 to 12 miles per hour with gusts reaching nearly 20 created a constantly shifting pattern of air movement that would require continuous adjustment and compensation throughout any shooting sequence. Temperature differentials between ground level and higher altitudes added another layer of complexity to the ballistic calculations required for accurate long-range shooting. The morning air, still cool from the overnight marine layer, would warm rapidly as the sun climbed higher, creating thermal columns and density variations that could deflect projectiles in unpredictable ways. Even experienced military snipers would have found such conditions challenging, particularly when attempting to demonstrate their skills before an audience of critical observers. Sarah's approach to the environmental challenges was characteristically methodical. Rather than relying solely on the electronic wind measurement systems provided by the facility, she spent several minutes observing natural wind indicators scattered throughout the shooting complex. Vegetation patterns, dust movement, the behavior of insects and small debris all provided information about air movement patterns that complemented, but did not always correlate with instrument readings. Her understanding of environmental factors went beyond the standard military training that most snipers received. Where conventional instruction focused on compensating for measured wind speeds and directions, Sarah's analysis incorporated the three-dimensional nature of air movement, accounting for vertical wind components and the complex interactions between different air masses that could affect projectile flight in ways that simple horizontal wind calculations could not predict. The ammunition she would use for the demonstration represented perhaps the most significant departure from conventional military practice. Standard military sniper cartridges were designed for reliability and consistent performance across a wide range of conditions and weapon systems. Power and penetration capability took precedence over the kind of absolute precision required. for extreme long-range accuracy, resulting in projectiles that were effective but not optimal for the kind of surgical precision that Sarah's demonstration would require. Her cartridges had been loaded with components that most military personnel had never encountered. The powder charge had been measured to within 1/10 of a grain, using propellants that burned more consistently than anything available through military supply channels. The bullets themselves represented the pinnacle of precision projectile design, with weight variations limited to fractions of a grain and dimensional tolerances that exceeded the specifications for precision aircraft components. Each cartridge case had been prepared through a process that involved multiple steps of measurement, sorting, and modification to ensure absolutely consistent internal volume and wall thickness. The brass had been stress-relieved through controlled heating and cooling cycles that eliminated the microscopic variations in material properties that could affect combustion characteristics and ultimately bullet velocity. Even the primers had been individually selected for consistent ignition characteristics, a level of attention to detail that bordered on obsessive, but was necessary for the kind of precision that Sarah's demonstration would require. Master Chief Harrison completed his final inspection of the shooting complex as the scheduled demonstration time approached. Range safety protocols had been verified, communication systems tested, and emergency procedures reviewed with all personnel who would be present during the live fire exercise. Despite his skepticism about the civilian consultant and her unconventional equipment, his professional standards demanded that all safety requirements be met regardless of the anticipated outcome. The first group of observers began taking their positions in the designated viewing area, their conversations a mixture of professional interest and barely concealed anticipation of entertainment. Watching civilian consultants attempt military qualification standards was not a common occurrence, and the unusual circumstances surrounding Sarah's equipment and background had generated more interest than most training exercises attracted. Lieutenant Commander Stevens, the officer responsible for overall sniper training programs at the facility, arrived with a small group of senior personnel whose presence indicated the significance that base leadership attached to the morning's demonstration. Stevens had reviewed Sarah's minimal personnel file and found it frustratingly vague about her background and qualifications. The technical consultant designation could cover anything from academic researchers to defense contractor representatives, but nothing in her documentation explained why someone with no apparent military experience would be confident enough to attempt qualification standards that challenged even experienced military marksmen. Sarah's final equipment check was performed with the same methodical precision that had characterized her preparation throughout the morning. Each scope adjustment was verified, ammunition inspected individually, and the weapon system's mechanical function confirmed through dry firing exercises that tested trigger pull consistency and action smoothness. Her movements displayed the kind of unconscious competence that indicated extensive experience with the specific equipment she was using. The rifle that drew so much skeptical attention from military observers represented a completely different philosophy of precision shooting than anything in the base armory. Where military weapons achieved accuracy through overwhelming force and robust construction, capable of withstanding harsh field conditions, Sarah's system achieved superior performance through elegant engineering and the kind of precision manufacturing that was typically reserved for scientific instruments rather than combat weapons. The stock, crafted from advanced composite materials that most firearms manufacturers had never worked with, provided a level of stability and vibration dampening that exceeded anything available in military service. The action, machined from aerospace-grade aluminum alloys and fitted to tolerances that required specialized measuring equipment to verify, functioned with the smooth precision of a precision timepiece. Even the trigger system incorporated design elements borrowed from competitive shooting disciplines, providing the kind of crisp, consistent release that enabled precise shot placement under the most demanding conditions. Environmental monitoring. Equipment scattered throughout the shooting complex provided continuous updates on the conditions that would affect Sarah's demonstration. Wind speed and direction measurements updated every few seconds, revealing the constantly shifting pattern of air movement that would challenge even the most sophisticated ballistic calculations. Temperature readings from multiple elevations showed the thermal gradients that would create density variations in the air column between firing position and targets. The targets themselves had been positioned according to standard military qualification protocols, with scoring zones that demanded precision rather than simply hitting somewhere within a large target area. Success would be measured not just by whether Sarah could hit the targets, but by her ability to place shots within scoring rings that represented the kind of accuracy required for effective military sniping applications. At 800 meters, the target presented a scoring zone roughly equivalent to the vital area of a human torso, a standard that acknowledged the reality that military snipers needed to be capable of neutralizing personnel targets with single shots under field conditions. The 1,200-meter target reduced the acceptable impact area significantly, reflecting the increased difficulty of maintaining precision at extended range, while still demanding the kind of accuracy that would be tactically effective. The 1,600-meter target represented the outer limits of what most military personnel considered practical engagement range for personnel targets. At that distance, environmental factors became so significant that even minor errors in calculation or execution could result in complete misses. The scoring zone was correspondingly small, requiring the kind of precision that separated truly elite marksmen from merely competent shooters. Master Chief Harrison's announcement that the demonstration was ready to begin brought immediate quiet to the assembled observers. Military personnel had been trained to recognize moments of significance, and the unusual circumstances surrounding this particular shooting exhibition had generated the kind of focused attention that was normally reserved for actual combat operations or major training exercises. Sarah's approach to the firing line was unhurried and deliberate, her movements displaying none of the nervous energy that might be expected from someone about to attempt a public demonstration of skills under challenging conditions. Her rifle, slung across her shoulder with the casual ease of someone completely comfortable with the weapon's handling characteristics, drew continued skeptical glances from observers who remained convinced that its unconventional appearance indicated inferior performance capability. The firing position she selected was not the most sheltered location available, nor did it offer the most favorable wind conditions for long-range shooting. Instead, Sarah chose a position that provided the clearest sightlines to all three target locations while accepting the environmental challenges that came with that choice. Her selection criteria appeared to prioritize tactical considerations over personal comfort, an approach that impressed some of the more experienced military observers, even before the actual shooting began. Her preparation routine at the firing line followed protocols that were clearly well established through extensive practice, but which differed significantly from the procedures taught in military sniper schools. Rather than immediately adopting a shooting position and beginning the formal qualification sequence, Sarah spent several minutes in careful observation of environmental conditions and target characteristics. The spotting scope she used for target observation was another departure from military standard equipment. Smaller and lighter than the robust military optics designed to withstand harsh field conditions, her spotting scope incorporated optical technologies that provided superior image clarity and light-gathering capability under the morning's challenging visibility conditions. Through it, she could observe not just the targets themselves, but the environmental indicators that would affect bullet flight throughout the morning. Wind patterns at different distances and elevations created a complex three-dimensional puzzle that required continuous analysis and adjustment throughout any extended shooting sequence. Sarah's approach to this challenge demonstrated understanding. that went beyond the standard military training most snipers received. Rather than simply measuring wind conditions at the firing position and making linear calculations for downrange effects, her analysis incorporated the reality that air movement varied significantly at different points along the bullet's flight path. Her first shot would be at the 800-meter target, a distance that represented a warm-up range for most military qualification sequences, but which would provide valuable information about how her rifle system was performing under the morning's specific conditions. The success or failure of this initial engagement would establish the baseline data necessary for the more challenging shots that would follow. The shooting position Sarah adopted was a classic prone stance, but executed with refinements that indicated extensive training in precision marksmanship disciplines. Her body alignment provided maximum stability while minimizing muscle tension that could affect shot placement. Her grip on the rifle was firm, but not rigid, allowing the weapon to recoil naturally without disrupting her sight picture for follow-up shots. Her breathing pattern, carefully controlled throughout the preparation sequence, shifted into the precise rhythm that would support sustained accuracy under pressure. Deep, controlled breaths followed by natural respiratory pause at the moment of shot release, allowing her cardiovascular system to provide the stable platform that precision shooting demanded. Heart rate, pulse pressure, even the subtle muscle tremors caused by normal physiological function, all were managed through techniques that went beyond standard military training. The sight picture she established through her rifle scope represented the culmination of all the morning's preparation activities. Environmental factors, target characteristics, weapon system capabilities, and ammunition performance all came together in the precise alignment of crosshairs and target that would determine whether her first shot would establish credibility or confirm the skeptical expectations of the assembled observers. Wind conditions at the moment of her first shot were challenging, but not impossible, with sustained speeds of 12 miles per hour and gusts approaching 15. The wind angle was not directly perpendicular to the line of fire, but rather at an oblique angle that would require both horizontal and vertical compensation to achieve accurate bullet placement. Temperature differentials along the bullet's flight path added another variable that most military snipers would have found challenging under demonstration conditions. The trigger break, when it came, was precisely timed to coincide with the natural respiratory pause that provided maximum stability. The rifle's recoil, modest compared to the heavy military cartridges that most observers expected, allowed Sarah to maintain sight picture throughout the shot sequence and observe bullet impact through her scope rather than losing target contact. During the recoil cycle, the electronic target system's immediate feedback eliminated any uncertainty about shot placement. The impact point, clearly visible on the monitoring screens positioned where all observers could see the results, fell precisely within the center scoring ring at 800 meters. Not just a hit, but a shot that demonstrated the kind of precision that most military personnel achieved only occasionally under ideal conditions. The reaction from the assembled observers was immediate and telling. Conversations that had been filled with skeptical commentary fell silent as personnel processed the implications of what they had just witnessed. A single successful shot could be attributed to luck or favorable conditions, but the precision of the bullet placement suggested capabilities that went far beyond beginner's fortune. Master Chief Harrison's expression had shifted from skeptical amusement to professional interest as he observed the target impact through his binoculars. 25 years of military service had taught him to recognize genuine shooting skill when he saw it, and the shot placement he was observing indicated capabilities that exceeded those of most military snipers under similar conditions. Sarah's transition to the 1,200-meter target was executed with the same methodical precision that had characterized her first shot. Environmental conditions continued to evolve as the morning progressed, with wind patterns shifting and thermal effects becoming more pronounced as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Rather than simply repeating her previous shooting sequence, she incorporated the new environmental data into updated ballistic calculations that accounted for the changed conditions. The 1,200-meter shot represented a significant increase in difficulty compared to the 800-meter engagement. At that distance, minor errors in environmental assessment or shooting technique could result in misses measured in feet rather than inches. The target scoring zone was correspondingly smaller, requiring precision that most military personnel achieved only after extensive training and experience. Her preparation for the second shot included careful reassessment of wind conditions throughout the bullet's flight path. The morning's evolving weather patterns had created a complex mixture of different air masses moving at different speeds and directions, requiring analysis that went far beyond the simple wind speed and direction measurements that most shooters relied upon. The shot sequence for the 1,200-meter target followed the same precise routine that had produced success at 800 meters, but with adjustments that accounted for the increased challenges of extended range shooting. Bullet drop at that distance would be measured in multiple feet rather than inches, requiring precise elevation adjustments based on ballistic calculations that incorporated not just distance, but also atmospheric density, temperature variations, and altitude effects. Her second shot produced the same immediate confirmation of success that had characterized the first engagement. The electronic target system showed bullet impact within the center scoring ring, demonstrating consistency that most observers had not expected from the unconventional equipment and civilian consultant who was using it. The implications of 2 consecutive precision shots began to register among the assembled military personnel. Single shots could be dismissed as fortunate accidents, but consecutive success under challenging conditions indicated systematic capability rather than random luck. Conversations among observers shifted from skeptical amusement to serious analysis of what they were witnessing. The 1,600-meter target represented the ultimate test of Sarah's capabilities and equipment. At that extreme range, environmental factors became so significant that even experienced military snipers required multiple attempts to achieve consistent accuracy. Bullet flight time approached 2 seconds, during which wind patterns, thermal effects, and atmospheric density variations could affect projectile trajectory in complex and unpredictable ways. Sarah's analysis of conditions for the final shot incorporated data from both previous engagements, using the bullet impact points as confirmation of her environmental assessments and ballistic calculations. The consistency of her shot placement provided validation that her approach to long-range precision shooting was producing predictable and repeatable results under the morning's challenging conditions. Her final preparation sequence was the most detailed of the morning, incorporating not just current environmental conditions, but also projected changes based on the continuing evolution of weather patterns throughout the shooting complex. Wind speeds had increased slightly as thermal effects began to dominate the early morning stability, and temperature differentials were creating density variations that would affect bullet flight in ways that required precise calculation and compensation. The 1,600-meter shot demanded everything that Sarah had learned about precision marksmanship under challenging conditions. Environmental factors that were manageable at shorter ranges became critically important at extreme distance, requiring analysis and compensation techniques that went far beyond standard military training. Her approach to these challenges would either confirm her status as a serious marksman or expose the limitations of her unconventional methods. Sight picture she established for the final shot represented the culmination of the morning's systematic approach to long-range precision shooting. Every environmental factor had been analyzed, every equipment variable had been accounted for, and every aspect of shooting technique had been optimized for the specific challenges of engaging a target at 1,600 meters under the prevailing conditions. Her final trigger break was timed with the same precision that had characterized the previous shots, but with the additional pressure of knowing that this engagement would determine how the entire demonstration was evaluated by the assembled military observers. Success would establish her credibility beyond any reasonable doubt, while failure would confirm the skeptical expectations that most personnel had maintained throughout the morning. The bullet's flight time to the distant target provided several seconds during which the assembled observers waited in complete silence for electronic confirmation of the shot's outcome. Environmental monitoring equipment continued to track the conditions that could affect projectile flight, while range personnel prepared to announce the results that would conclude the morning's unusual demonstration. When the electronic target system finally displayed the impact point, the result produced complete silence among the assembled observers. The bullet had struck within the center scoring ring at 1,600 meters, completing a perfect qualification sequence under conditions that would have challenged even the most experienced military snipers. The implications of what they had just witnessed began to register among base personnel as conversations resumed with a completely different tone than had characterized the morning's earlier skepticism. 3 consecutive precision shots at extended range, using unconventional equipment under challenging environmental conditions, could not be dismissed as luck or favorable circumstances. Master Chief Harrison's reaction was perhaps the most telling indicator of how dramatically the morning's events had shifted perceptions about the civilian consultant and her unusual rifle system. His expression had evolved from skeptical amusement through professional interest to something approaching professional respect as he processed the implications of the shooting performance he had just observed. But the demonstration was far from over, and what would happen next would transform professional respect into something much more profound and unsettling for everyone who had witnessed Sarah Thompson's shooting exhibition. The morning had established her credentials as a marksman, but the afternoon would reveal capabilities that went far beyond anything that conventional military training could explain. The silence that followed Sarah's final shot stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Lieutenant Commander Stevens broke the spell with a question that would change everything. "Thompson, that was exceptional shooting, but I'm curious about something. Your personnel file indicates technical consulting experience, but those shots suggest extensive practical training. Where exactly did you develop these skills?" Sarah's response was characteristically measured, but there was something in her tone that made several observers pay closer attention. "Commander, I appreciate the opportunity to demonstrate these techniques. However, I should mention that the morning's exercise was primarily intended to establish baseline performance parameters for the actual assessment I was sent here to conduct." The implications of her statement took a moment to register among the assembled personnel. Master Chief Harrison was the first to understand what she was suggesting. "Are you saying that wasn't the real demonstration?" "Correct, Master Chief. The qualification sequence we just completed represents standard evaluation protocols for conventional military applications. My assignment here involves assessment of capabilities under more specialized operational scenarios." Sarah's explanation was delivered with the same professional detachment she had maintained throughout the morning, but something in her demeanor had shifted subtly. Commander Stevens exchanged glances with the other senior personnel present, their expressions reflecting a mixture of curiosity and growing concern about what they might be about to witness. "What kind of specialized scenarios are we talking about, Thompson?" Sarah's answer came after a brief pause that suggested careful consideration of how much information she should reveal. "High-value target elimination under extreme range and environmental constraints. Scenarios where conventional military engagement protocols are not applicable due to operational security requirements or target accessibility limitations." Terminology she was using sent ripples of recognition through some of the more experienced military observers. High-value target elimination was euphemistic language for assassination operations, the kind of missions that were rarely discussed. openly and never conducted under normal military protocols. The suggestion that Sarah might be involved in such activities began to recontextualize everything they had witnessed during the morning's demonstration. Petty Officer Martinez, whose earlier comments about toy guns had established the morning's skeptical tone, found his voice first among the enlisted personnel. "Ma'am, are you saying you're here to demonstrate sniper techniques for special operations applications?" "Not exactly, Martinez." Sarah's use of his name, despite never having been formally introduced, was noted by several observers. "I'm here to assess whether current military training protocols adequately prepare personnel for scenarios they might encounter in certain classified operational environments." Master Chief Harrison's military instincts were now fully engaged. 25 years of service had taught him to recognize when conversations were moving into areas that required security clearances he might not possess. "Thompson, perhaps we should continue this discussion in a more appropriate setting, with the proper personnel present." Sarah nodded in acknowledgement of his concern, but her next statement made it clear that the demonstration was far from concluded. "Master Chief, I appreciate your attention to security protocols. However, the assessment I was sent to conduct requires practical demonstration under conditions that simulate actual operational scenarios. The morning's exercise was preliminary evaluation. The actual test requires more challenging parameters." The implications of what she was suggesting began to register among the assembled personnel. If the precision shooting they had just witnessed represented preliminary evaluation, then whatever came next would involve capabilities that went far beyond conventional military training. The growing realization that they might be in the presence of someone whose background involved classified operations began to change the atmosphere surrounding the entire demonstration. Commander Stevens made the decision that protocol demanded under the circumstances. All personnel without appropriate security clearances will need to clear the area immediately. Master Chief Harrison, please coordinate with base security to establish proper protocols for whatever demonstration Ms. Thompson needs to conduct. The exodus of personnel who lacked the necessary clearances reduced the number of observers significantly, but those who remained represented the most experienced and senior military personnel at the facility. Their continued presence indicated that whatever Sarah was about to demonstrate fell within their authorized areas of knowledge, but their expression suggested that none of them were entirely certain what they were about to witness. Sarah waited patiently while security protocols were established and communication channels were secured according to classified demonstration requirements. Her demeanor remained calm and professional, but there was something in her bearing that suggested the preliminary nature of the morning's activities was about to give way to something much more significant. The equipment she retrieved from her case for the next phase of demonstration was noticeably different from the rifle system she had used for the qualification sequence. While maintaining the same general configuration, additional components were now visible that had not been present during the morning's shooting. Most notably, an electronic device was now mounted to the rifle's receiver, connected by cables to what appeared to be a compact computer system. Master Chief Harrison's examination of the modified equipment revealed technology that he had never encountered in conventional military applications. "Thompson, what exactly are we looking at here?" "Master Chief, this system represents integration of advanced ballistic computation with real-time environmental analysis and target designation capabilities. It's designed for scenarios where conventional spotting and communication protocols are not feasible due to operational security constraints." Sarah's explanation was technically accurate, but deliberately vague about the specific applications for which such technology had been developed. The targets selected for the next phase of demonstration were positioned at distances that pushed far beyond anything used in conventional military training. The closest target was positioned at 2,000 meters, a range that exceeded the practical engagement envelope for most military sniper systems. More significantly, the targets themselves were not the large, clearly marked panels used for standard qualification procedures, but rather much smaller objects that would require extraordinary precision to engage successfully. Commander Stevens studied the target array through high-powered binoculars, his expression growing increasingly serious as he processed what Sarah was proposing to attempt. Thompson, are you seriously suggesting that you intend to engage targets at 2,000 meters with that rifle system? Commander, the operational scenarios I was sent to assess involve engagement parameters that exceed conventional military training standards. 2,000-meter shots represent the minimum range requirements for certain classified applications. Sarah's response was matter-of-fact, as if discussing weather conditions rather than shooting capabilities that push the absolute limits of what most military personnel considered possible. The environmental conditions for extended range shooting had deteriorated throughout the morning as thermal effects and wind patterns became more complex. Sustained winds now exceeded 15 miles per hour with gusts approaching 25, while temperature differentials had created atmospheric density variations that would make precise ballistic calculations extremely challenging even under ideal circumstances. Sarah's preparation for the extended range demonstration involved procedures that went far beyond anything the observing military personnel had seen during conventional sniper training. The electronic system mounted to her rifle was interfaced with environmental monitoring equipment positioned throughout the shooting complex, providing real-time data on atmospheric conditions at multiple points along the projected bullet flight path. The computer system she employed for ballistic calculations incorporated variables that most military personnel had never considered in shooting applications. Altitude variations along the bullet's trajectory, gravitational anomalies caused by local geological features, even the effects of the Earth's rotation on projectile flight over the extended time required for bullets to reach targets at extreme range, all were factored into computational models that produced firing solutions of unprecedented accuracy. Her first target at 2,000 meters was a steel plate measuring 12 inches square, positioned to simulate the vital zone of a personnel target at that extreme range. Success would require not just hitting the target, but placing the shot within a scoring area that represented the kind of precision necessary for guaranteed incapacitation of a high-value target under operational conditions. The sight picture she established for the 2,000-meter shot required adjustments that pushed her optical system to its operational limits. The target, barely visible even through high magnification optics, appeared as little more than a distant speck that wavered constantly due to atmospheric distortion effects that became significant at such extended ranges. Environmental compensation for the extreme range shot required calculations that incorporated factors most shooters never encountered. Bullet flight time would exceed 3 seconds, during which atmospheric conditions could change significantly. Wind patterns at different altitudes along the trajectory could vary dramatically, requiring analysis of meteorological data that went far beyond simple wind speed and direction measurements. Her shooting position for the extreme range demonstration was selected not for comfort or convenience, but for optimal ballistic performance under the prevailing conditions. The location provided clear sight lines to the distant target while minimizing the atmospheric distortion effects that could compromise accuracy at such extended range. The ammunition selected for the 2,000-meter shot represented the pinnacle of precision projectile technology. Custom-loaded cartridges using propellants that burned more consistently than anything available through military supply channels, combined with bullets that had been individually selected for dimensional consistency and aerodynamic perfection. Each round represented hours of preparation and component selection to achieve the kind of performance that extreme range precision shooting demanded. Sarah's final preparation sequence incorporated data from atmospheric monitoring systems, ballistic computation models, and target analysis procedures that produced a firing solution accurate to fractions of angular minutes. The complexity of the calculations required for success at 2,000 meters exceeded anything that could be performed manually, requiring computer-assisted analysis that integrated dozens of environmental variables into comprehensive ballistic predictions. The shot, when it came, was executed with the same precise timing that had characterized her earlier demonstration, but with the additional pressure of knowing that success at extreme range would establish capabilities that went far beyond conventional military training. Environmental conditions at the moment of firing were challenging but within acceptable parameters for the advanced ballistic computation system she was employing. Bullet flight time to the distant target provided several seconds during which atmospheric conditions could potentially change enough to affect accuracy. The electronic monitoring systems tracked environmental parameters throughout the projectile's flight, providing real-time confirmation that conditions remained within the calculated parameters necessary for successful target engagement. Impact confirmation came through electronic sensors positioned at the target location rather than visual observation, which was impossible at such extreme range under the prevailing atmospheric conditions. When the confirmation signal indicated successful target engagement, the assembled observers processed the implications of what they had just witnessed with expressions that ranged from professional admiration to something approaching disbelief. Master Chief Harrison's reaction was immediate and telling. "Thompson, I've been training military snipers for 25 years, and I've never seen shooting like that. Where exactly did you learn to do this?" Sarah's response came after a pause that suggested careful consideration of how much information she should reveal about her background and experience. "Master Chief, my training took place in operational environments where conventional military protocols were not applicable. The techniques you've observed represent development work conducted under classified programs that most military personnel never encounter." The implications of her statement began to register among the senior personnel present. Classified programs involving extreme range precision shooting suggested involvement in operations that went far beyond conventional military applications. The growing realization that they might be in the presence of someone whose background involved activities that were rarely acknowledged officially began to change the entire context of the morning's demonstration. Commander Stevens made the decision that security protocols demanded under the circumstances. "Thompson, I think we need to have a more detailed conversation about your background and the nature of the assessment you were sent here to conduct. This demonstration has raised questions that require answers from someone with appropriate authority." Sarah nodded in acknowledgement of his concern, but her next statement indicated that the demonstration was still not complete. "Commander, I understand your position. However, there is one additional element of the assessment that requires completion before I can provide the background information you're requesting." The suggestion that there was yet another level to the demonstration produced visible tension among the assembled personnel. If extreme range precision shooting represented something less than Sarah's full capabilities, then whatever came next would involve techniques that pushed beyond anything they had previously imagined possible. The final component of Sarah's assessment involved a target scenario that challenged fundamental assumptions about what could be achieved through precision marksmanship under operational conditions. The target she selected was not positioned at greater distance than the 2,000-meter engagement, but rather presented a challenge that required capabilities that went far beyond simple long-range accuracy. A steel door had been positioned at 1,500 meters, with a small aperture cut through its center, measuring exactly 2 inches in diameter. The challenge was not simply to hit a target at that range, but to place a projectile through an opening that allowed virtually no margin for error while compensating for all the environmental factors that could affect bullet placement at extended range. The Keyhole shot, as such demonstrations were known in certain classified circles, represented the ultimate test of precision marksmanship capabilities under operational conditions. Success required not just extraordinary shooting skill, but Also ballistic computation capabilities and environmental analysis, techniques that pushed the absolute limits of what was technically achievable. Master Chief Harrison studied the target setup through high-powered optics, his expression reflecting growing understanding of what Sarah was proposing to attempt. "Thompson, are you suggesting that you intend to thread a bullet through a 2-inch opening at 1,500 meters? Correct, Master Chief. This particular scenario simulates operational requirements where target engagement must be accomplished through extremely restrictive access points while maintaining complete precision. It represents the kind of challenge that certain classified missions might require." Sarah's explanation was delivered with the same professional detachment that had characterized her previous demonstrations, as if discussing routine training exercises rather than shooting feats that pushed beyond the realm of normal human capability. The environmental conditions for the Keyhole shot were perhaps the most challenging of the entire day. Wind patterns had continued to evolve as thermal effects became more pronounced, creating complex air movement that varied significantly at different altitudes along the bullet's flight path. Temperature differentials had created atmospheric density variations that would affect projectile trajectory in ways that required precise calculation and compensation. Sarah's preparation for the Keyhole shot involved the most sophisticated ballistic analysis of the entire demonstration. The margin for error was so small that environmental factors which might be negligible under normal circumstances became critically important when success was measured in fractions of inches rather than scoring rings or target zones. The computer system she employed for the final ballistic calculations incorporated environmental data from sensors positioned throughout the shooting complex, meteorological information from multiple sources, and ballistic models that accounted for every factor that could potentially affect bullet placement at the target. The complexity of the analysis required for success exceeded anything that most military personnel had ever encountered. Her rifle system for the Keyhole shot required adjustments that utilized every capability of her advanced optical and mechanical systems. The precision required for threading a projectile through a 2-inch aperture at 1,500 meters pushed her equipment to its absolute operational limits, while demanding shooting technique that left no room for error. The sight picture she established for the Keyhole shot represented the culmination of all the day's preparation activities. Environmental analysis, ballistic computation, equipment optimization, and shooting technique all came together in the precise alignment necessary to achieve success under conditions that challenged the fundamental limits of what was possible. Through precision marksmanship, her final trigger break was timed with microsecond precision to coincide with the optimal moment, when all environmental factors aligned to provide the best possible conditions for successful target engagement. The shot represented not just individual shooting skill, but also the integration of advanced technology and analytical techniques that most military personnel had never encountered. Bullet flight time to the target provided nearly 2 seconds, during which environmental conditions could potentially change enough to compromise accuracy. Electronic monitoring systems tracked atmospheric parameters throughout the projectile's flight, confirming that conditions remained within the narrow parameters necessary for successful engagement of the extremely small target aperture. Confirmation of successful target engagement came through electronic sensors that detected bullet passage through the Keyhole aperture. When the confirmation signal indicated that Sarah had successfully threaded her projectile through the 2-inch opening at 1,500 meters, the assembled observers fell into complete silence as they processed the implications of what they had just witnessed. The Keyhole shot represented capabilities that went far beyond anything that conventional military training could explain or normal human ability could account for. The precision required for success under such challenging conditions suggested involvement in programs and operations that existed at the absolute cutting edge of what was technically possible in precision marksmanship applications. Master Chief Harrison's reaction was perhaps the most telling indicator of how profoundly the day's demonstrations had challenged his understanding of what was possible through advanced marksmanship training. "Thompson, I need to ask you directly. What exactly is your background, and who sent you here?" Sarah's response came after a long pause during which she appeared to be weighing carefully how much information she could reveal about her true identity and mission. "Master Chief, my background involves operations that are conducted under programs so classified that most Pentagon officials are not aware of their existence. I was sent here to assess whether current military training protocols are adequate for personnel who might be selected for assignment to those programs." The implications of her statement began to register among the senior personnel present. Programs so classified that Pentagon officials were unaware of their existence suggested involvement in activities that operated completely outside normal military command structures. The growing realization that they had been witnessing demonstrations by someone whose operational background might involve the most sensitive national security missions began to recontextualize everything they had observed throughout the day. Commander Stevens made the decision that circumstances demanded. "Thompson, I think it's time for you to provide complete information about who you are and why you're really here. The capabilities you've demonstrated today go far beyond anything that can be explained by conventional training or normal human ability." Sarah's response revealed the careful consideration she had been giving to this moment throughout the day's activities. "Commander, my name is Sarah Thompson, but that's not the identity under which I conducted operations for the past 8 years. My operational designation was Ghost 7, and I was the primary elimination specialist for a classified program known as Project Nightfall." The revelation of her true identity sent shockwaves through the assembled personnel. Project Nightfall was legendary in certain intelligence and special operations circles, whispered about in conversations that occurred only among personnel with the highest security clearances. The program was rumored to involve elimination specialists who operated completely outside normal military command structures, conducting missions that were never officially acknowledged, and using capabilities that pushed beyond anything available through conventional training. Ghost 7 was a designation that some of the senior personnel present had heard mentioned in classified briefings, always in the context of operations that had achieved results that seemed impossible under normal circumstances. High-value targets eliminated under conditions that conventional military operations could not have succeeded. Threats neutralized with precision that exceeded anything that normal sniper capabilities could account for. Master Chief Harrison's expression reflected the profound implications of what Sarah had just revealed. "Thompson, if you're really Ghost 7, then you're supposedly the operator who eliminated the terrorist cell leader in Damascus under conditions that everyone said were impossible." Among other missions, Master Chief, the Damascus operation was challenging primarily because of the urban environment and the requirement for complete operational security. The target was positioned behind multiple barriers with limited access points, requiring precision shooting through apertures that provided minimal margin for error. Sarah's confirmation was delivered with the same matter-of-fact tone she had used throughout the day, as if discussing routine training exercises rather than operations that had significant strategic implications. The Damascus mission had become legendary in classified intelligence circles because it involved eliminating a high-value target who was positioned in a fortified compound with multiple layers of security. The successful engagement had required shooting through a series of obstacles that most experts considered insurmountable, using techniques and capabilities that exceeded anything available through conventional military training. Commander Stevens processed the implications of having Ghost 7 conducting assessment activities at his training facility. "Thompson, or should I say Ghost 7, what exactly are you assessing here, and why was this demonstration necessary?" Sarah's explanation revealed the broader context that had brought her to the Coronado training facility. "Commander, Project Nightfall has been tasked with identifying personnel who might be suitable for advanced training in specialized elimination techniques. Current military sniper training, while excellent for conventional applications, does not adequately prepare personnel for the kind of operations that Nightfall conducts. The suggestion that there were military applications that went beyond even the most advanced conventional training programs raised questions about what kinds of missions Project Nightfall was conducting and why such extreme capabilities were necessary. The implications were both fascinating and somewhat disturbing for personnel who had dedicated their careers to understanding the limits of what military training could achieve. The assessment I was sent to conduct involved evaluating whether personnel trained through conventional military programs could adapt to the advanced techniques and technologies that Nightfall operations require. Today's demonstration was designed to establish baseline performance parameters and to identify individuals who might possess the aptitude for more specialized training. Sarah's explanation provided context for the day's activities while raising additional questions about the nature of Project Nightfall's missions and requirements. Master Chief Harrison found himself in the unusual position of having his fundamental assumptions about advanced military training challenged by someone whose capabilities exceeded anything he had previously encountered. Ghost 7, what you've demonstrated today goes beyond anything we teach here. How does someone develop those kinds of capabilities? Sarah's response revealed something of the selection and training processes that created operators like Ghost 7. Master Chief, Nightfall training begins with personnel who already demonstrate exceptional aptitude through conventional military programs. However, the actual development of operational capabilities requires exposure to techniques and technologies that are not available through normal military channels. The training program she described involved elements that pushed far beyond conventional military instruction. Advanced ballistic computation using classified mathematical models, environmental analysis techniques that incorporated meteorological data unavailable to normal military operations, and precision shooting training using equipment that represented the absolute cutting edge of what was technically possible in small arms technology. The psychological preparation component of Nightfall training is perhaps more important than the technical elements. Sarah continued. Operations often require functioning under conditions of complete isolation, making decisions that affect strategic outcomes, and maintaining performance standards under stress levels that most military personnel never experience. Her description of the psychological demands placed on Nightfall operators provided insight into why such programs required selection from personnel who had already demonstrated exceptional capabilities through conventional military training. The mental resilience necessary for operating under such conditions went far beyond what normal military psychology could account for or prepare individuals to handle. Commander Stevens found himself trying to process the implications of having one of the military's most classified operatives conducting assessment activities at his facility. Ghost 7. Assuming everything you've told us is accurate, what happens? Next, what are you looking for in terms of personnel assessment? Sarah's response revealed the specific objectives that had brought her to the Coronado training facility. Commander, Nightfall has authorization to recruit a limited number of personnel for advanced training programs. The assessment I was sent to conduct involves identifying individuals who demonstrate not just exceptional shooting ability, but also the psychological profile and adaptive capacity that Nightfall operations require. The criteria she described for Nightfall selection went far beyond conventional military assessment parameters. Technical proficiency with advanced weapon systems was necessary, but not sufficient. Psychological resilience under extreme stress, decision-making capability under conditions of incomplete information, and the ability to function effectively under complete operational isolation were equally important factors in determining suitability for advanced training. Today's demonstration was designed to provide baseline information about current training effectiveness, and to observe how personnel respond to capabilities that exceed their previous experience. The reactions I've observed provide valuable data about who might be suitable for more advanced assessment procedures. Sarah's explanation revealed that the day's activities had been as much about evaluating the observers as demonstrating her own capabilities. Master Chief Harrison realized that he and his personnel had been under evaluation throughout the day without recognizing it. Ghost 7, are you saying that you've been assessing us while we thought we were assessing you? Correct, Master Chief. Nightfall selection procedures often involve observing how individuals respond to capabilities and information that challenge their previous understanding. The reactions I've observed today provide insight into who might possess the adaptability that advanced operations require. Sarah's confirmation revealed the sophisticated nature of Project Nightfall's recruitment and assessment procedures. The realization that they had been under evaluation by one of the military's most classified operatives, while believing they were observing a civilian consultant's demonstration, created a complex mixture of professional admiration and concern among the assembled personnel. The sophistication of the assessment procedures suggested that Project Nightfall's recruitment activities were conducted at levels of analysis that exceeded anything available through conventional military selection processes. Commander Stevens found himself trying to determine what his responsibilities were under the circumstances. Ghost 7, what are your recommendations based on today's assessment? And what information can we share with base personnel about what they've witnessed? Sarah's response addressed both the assessment outcomes and the security implications of the day's demonstration. Commander, I've identified several individuals who warrant further evaluation for possible Nightfall recruitment. However, the specific details of today's demonstration and my identity must remain classified at the highest levels. Base personnel can be informed that technical assessment activities were conducted, but no details about capabilities or personnel involved can be disclosed. The security requirements she outlined were consistent with the classification levels that surrounded Project Nightfall's activities. Operations that pushed beyond conventional military capabilities required protection through security measures that exceeded normal classification procedures, ensuring that techniques and technologies remained unavailable to potential adversaries or unauthorized personnel. The personnel I've identified for possible further assessment will receive notification through appropriate channels if Nightfall decides to extend recruitment invitations. However, participation in advanced training programs is entirely voluntary and requires security clearances that exceed anything most military personnel currently possess. Sarah's explanation revealed the careful procedures that governed Project Nightfall's recruitment and training activities. Master Chief Harrison found himself trying to process the profound implications of what he had learned about advanced military capabilities and the selection procedures for accessing them. Ghost 7, one final question. Will we see you again? Or was today's assessment the extent of Project Nightfall's activities here? Sarah's response suggested that Project Nightfall's assessment activities were more extensive than a single demonstration at one training facility. Master Chief, Nightfall conducts assessment activities at multiple locations and involves evaluation procedures that extend over considerable time periods. Today's demonstration was one component of a comprehensive assessment program that evaluates personnel and training effectiveness across the entire special operations community. The implications of her statement suggested that Project Nightfall's activities extended far beyond what had occurred at the Coronado training facility. Assessment activities were apparently being conducted throughout the military special operations community, identifying personnel who might possess the unique combination of capabilities and psychological characteristics that advanced operations required. As the formal conclusion of the day's demonstration approached, Sarah began the process of securing her equipment and preparing for departure. The rifle system that had generated so much skeptical attention during the morning's activities was carefully disassembled and packed with the same methodical precision that had characterized every aspect of her performance throughout the day. The electronic systems that had enabled her extreme-range precision shooting were secured according to protocols that reflected their classified nature and the security requirements that surrounded Project Nightfall's technologies. Even the spent cartridge cases from her demonstration shots were collected and secured, ensuring that no physical evidence of the advanced ammunition capabilities remained available for analysis. Her departure from the facility was as unremarkable as her arrival had been, with transportation arrangements that provided no indication of her true identity or the significance of the day's activities. The personnel who had witnessed her demonstration were left to process the implications of what they had learned about advanced military capabilities and the selection procedures for accessing them. The official record of the day's activities would reflect only that technical assessment procedures had been conducted by authorized personnel, with no details about specific capabilities demonstrated or personnel involved. The classified nature of Project Nightfall's activities required protection through security measures that ensured operational techniques and technologies remained unavailable to unauthorized personnel. But the impact of Ghost 7's demonstration would extend far beyond the official records or security classifications that surrounded her visit. The personnel who had witnessed capabilities that exceeded their previous understanding of what was possible through advanced military training would carry that knowledge with them throughout their careers, even if they could never discuss the specific details of what they had observed. For some of the individuals who had been identified for possible Nightfall recruitment, the day's demonstration represented the beginning of a selection process that might lead to training and operational assignments that pushed far beyond anything available through conventional military service. The opportunity to develop capabilities that exceeded normal human limits through access to the most advanced techniques and technologies available represented both extraordinary professional opportunity and profound personal challenge. The legend of Ghost 7 would continue to grow in the classified circles where such stories were whispered among personnel with appropriate security clearances. Stories of impossible shots made under conditions that challenged fundamental assumptions about what could be achieved through precision marksmanship, missions accomplished that conventional military operations could never have succeeded, and capabilities that pushed beyond the limits of what normal training could account for. But perhaps the most significant impact of the day's demonstration was the realization among senior military personnel that there were levels of capability and operational requirements that exceeded anything they had previously understood about advanced military training. The existence of programs like Project Nightfall suggested that the nation's most sensitive security requirements were being addressed through methods and capabilities that operated completely outside normal military understanding. The transformation of Sarah Thompson from suspected civilian consultant to confirmed Ghost 7 operator represented more than just a revelation about individual identity. It demonstrated the sophisticated methods through which the military's most classified programs identified and recruited personnel who possessed the unique combination of capabilities necessary for operations that pushed beyond conventional limits. As the sun set over the Coronado training facility, the personnel who had witnessed the day's extraordinary demonstration began the process of integrating what they had learned into their understanding of advanced military capabilities. Some would receive recruitment invitations that would lead to training and operational assignments beyond anything they had previously imagined possible. Others would carry the knowledge of what they had witnessed as a reminder that the nation's security requirements were being addressed through methods and capabilities that exceeded anything available through conventional military training. The existence of operators like Ghost 7 and programs like Project Nightfall provided assurance that even the most challenging threats could be addressed through precision and capabilities that pushed beyond normal human limits, the days. Demonstration had established that the boundaries of what was possible through advanced military training extended far beyond anything that conventional wisdom had previously suggested. In a world where national security threats continued to evolve and present challenges that exceeded traditional military solutions, the existence of capabilities like those demonstrated by Ghost 7 provided essential assurance that no threat was beyond the reach of American military precision. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.